Welcome back to some new petty revenge stories. I hope you had a great day. The first story is called The Master of Compliance. Back when I was at school, the literature professor was a malicious compliance master. He had a friendly rivalry against the dean. They'd been working together for nearly 20 to 30 years, so they knew each other very well and played pranks on each other as well. When we were in class, if someone knocked on the door, the usual was that the student closest to the door would get up and open. One time, the dean knocked when the professor was teaching. I got up to open the door, and the dean said, "I want him," pointing at the professor to open the door. I look at the professor, and he says, "Okay, close the door and go sit back down." And then the professor drops on his knees and starts walking on his knees to the door, shouting, "We are sorry, oh great dean. We are not worthy of your presence. Please forgive us if we've done wrong." It took him perhaps 2 minutes to do the 2-meter walk to the door. We lost it. We were laughing so hard. Dean was standing there with a look that mixed bafflement and anger, but at the same time trying not to burst into laughter. The fact that what Dean came to say was the most standard, mundane and generic announcement made it even funnier somehow. This was the professor's typical behavior. He used to spend a lot of chalk writing on the board, almost twice as much as the next professor. So the guy in charge of supplies complained, and the head of studies cut the professor's chalk supply in half, so he would steal other professors' chalk to the amount he thought he needed. He told the story about the first time he had to teach, almost 30 years before my time at the school. Bear in mind, he was short, bald, with a mustache, and had to use huge green-tinted glasses. His first class ever was with the misfits of the school, rowdy class. He stood up at the podium. They had podiums back then, and nobody even tried to listen to what he had to say. 10 minutes passed, and the professor said, "Excuse me guys, do you want me to do the class or are you up to something more important?" One of the bullies told him to beat it, and everybody laughed. So he grabbed the newspaper, took a seat at his desk and stayed there for the whole class, without saying a word. When the ring that signaled that the class was over rang, he got up. He said, "Okay, tomorrow we'll have an exam, 1 of 3 for the semester. You have to have at least an average of 6 points to pass the semester. The exam will be about what I was supposed to teach today." And with that he walked out of the room. We loved the guy. He was fair, he had a true passion for literature, he was a good professor and made the classes nice and interesting. At the end of our first semester he submitted the grades for each student to the head of studies. Head of studies was the worst. He was concerned about the image the school had doors out rather than what the students really learned. He had quotas for students that could pass and students who had to fail each class. The professor submitted a list for our class, mostly very good students, where 80% of the class passed with flying colors, 8, 9s and 10s out of 10. Just one guy scored below 6, which meant he failed the class. He got called to the head of studies office. Head of studies was angry, shouting that there were too few people failing and that the professor was way too generous with the grading system he used. The professor stood there and just listened. He said okay and left. Cue Malicious Compliance number 1. He submitted a new list. Every single student had a 2, failure for the whole class. He got called to the head of studies office again. Head of studies was fuming again. He told him he did not want this mockery and to submit a new list with better grades. The professor said okay and left. Cue Malicious Compliance number 2. He submitted a new list. Every single student had a 10. He got called to the head of studies office again. Head of studies was pretty much having a heart attack. Before he could say anything, the professor says, "What? You didn't like the new list also? I'll tell you what, I know what each student deserves, so shut up and let me do my work, okay?" Produced the original list and walked out. The list got accepted. The next story is called Parking Peeves. This happened some years back. In our street, parking is very tight, and not all of us have a garage to keep our car inside. In fact, many live in apartments without a garage, so many cars overflow into the street. For obvious reasons, we don't park cars in front of other people's garages. We have 3 cars. I keep 2 in the garage and a third parked in front of the garage door, usually the one leaving first in the morning. This will cause me sometimes to have to juggle the cars around. One evening, while doing this juggling, I placed my wife's car for a minute or so in front of a garage of a neighbor 3 doors up. As soon as I started reversing my car into the garage, the lady arrives and starts honking rudely to remove the car. I walked out of the garage and proceeded to move my wife's car in place. It didn't take more than a minute of her time, but she kept honking and berated me for parking there. She has a very large SUV and has to park on the street, taking up the space in front of her garage, her apartment door and the other in between neighbor's door. A week or so later, the same happened, but this time I spotted her in the nick of time as she was coming around the corner. That is when my revenge kicked in. I left my wife's car in front of the in-between neighbor's door and his garage, a workshop, so she couldn't complain. However, this still didn't leave sufficient space for her SUV. After parking my car in my garage, instead of removing it immediately, I walked into the neighbor's workshop. I had a chat over a beer with him for the best part of half an hour before removing my wife's car and placing it back in front of my garage door. This caused her to circle a few streets to find a parking spot large enough to accommodate her SUV in a place that wasn't on her doorstep. The last story is called A Bad Pairing. I travel often for work, and whenever possible I bring my golf clubs to make my trips more bearable. This usually leads me to play solo with random golfers, and luckily I've had a great streak of pleasant pairings, thanks to the grace of the golf gods and my easygoing nature. However, my streak came to an end during my recent visit to Grand Rapids. I was eagerly looking forward to playing Pilgrim's Run, a course I had wanted to play for a while. Unfortunately, my luck took a turn when I was paired with a husband and wife duo, and I sensed trouble from the tee box. We started on the 10th hole, a short par 4, where it's clearly designed to hit less than a driver and position the ball in an accessible part of the fairway before a straightforward pitch to the green. To my surprise, the husband, who seemed to be in his late 50s, initially walked towards the forward tees, then realized the distance and returned to the tees I was playing from, driver in hand. The starter and I exchanged a knowing glance. My streak was about to be broken. The husband dribbled his driver off the tee, and off we went. The wife turned out to be a sweetheart and a surprisingly solid golfer. While she was not a good golfer by any means, she consistently got her right onto her front side and made solid contact. Fast forward to the 10th green, our first hole, and the husband began berating his wife for unintentionally walking through my line and talking during my putt. These things didn't bother me, and I made sure to let her know. By the 3rd hole, the husband had developed a routine of taking 5 practice swings before every shot. He was going through an elaborate pre-shot routine, changing clubs multiple times, and he continued to scold his wife for infractions that he himself was committing, talking during my swing, walking in my line, and so on. He made 3 excuses for every terrible shot and stubbornly played from the same tees as me. Despite not hitting his driver as far as my 5-iron, he would drop off his wife at her ball and then leave her to walk or rely on me for transportation. He got upset when we were put on the clock and blamed our delay on stopping to get food, conveniently ignoring the 2 to 3 fairway mulligans he was taking on each hole, and the list went on. As the round progressed, I found myself in a difficult situation with nowhere to escape, as the group ahead of us was 4. I had to do something. That's when I decided to use his wife. I made her feel like a pro player. Regardless of what the husband did, I completely ignored him. It became a game within a game for me, trying new and insidious ways to mess with the guy. It only took a hole and a half for him to start getting annoyed, and by the time we made the turn, I was certain he was having a miserable time. In the end, I shot 8 over, and his wife claimed it was the best she had played in years. Unfortunately, I never did find out how the husband fared. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe. And if you have time, watch another one of my videos. And now, I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Bye bye.